What value would you put on this in an apocalyptic scenario? A tube or a pouch of 20? Before you rush to the comments section, give my video here a shot, and then let me know your opinion. First, I wanted to thank all the new subscribers for tuning in and leaving comments. I do read them all and appreciate your varied views on my 10 reasons why you should have copper in your survival stash video. As a thank you, I'll make sure to deliver more content with attention to quality, keeping your comments in mind. Oh, and I'll dial back the music. First up, after this intro, a very short story to help set the mood for today's topic. Hope you like it. If you'd like to skip my short story, fast forward to about the 4-minute mark. Blackened husks of a ruined buildings dot the dusty landscape before you. These are the only signs of a once advanced civilization that's no more. A welcome breeze cools the sweat running down your dirt-caked face, if only for a moment. A short stretch of crude huts and lopsided tents, made of a variety of mismatched scavenged materials, squat alongside the cracked asphalt road that stretches out toward empty desert land. You glance at the interior of a particularly large tent to your left and see a tired-looking elderly couple rush to the side of a child with a terrible, ragged cough. They do their best with moistened towels and a faded plastic cup of water, but it doesn't look good for the kid. Most of the hovels have someone sitting out in front of them in partial shade, hoping for some chance of barter for the meager goods set out for display on rickety tables. Much of what they offer is useless junk or parts for potential repair of some device you don't have. Your stomach grumbles and reminds you of why you came into the settlement in the first place. You unscrew a battered and nearly depleted tube of Flitz metal polish and use a filthy rag to apply a small dot of the bluish-gray paste to one side of a copper bullion round that is stained and tarnished from handling. Another tall wanderer in from the road in leather and cloth wrappings from head to toe passes you as you both continue to look for something of value from the vendors. You rub the cloth in small circles with thumb and forefinger until the coin nearly sparkles. One man sitting under a shallow hut has a handful of red, prickly pear fruit in a basket he offers for trade. It's surrounded by several baskets roughly woven from the twisted branches of creosote bush. Beside these, there are several healing tinctures and oil salves and recycled bottles. You've purchased the oil from the man before. Everything except fruits come from the same plant that is nearly the only thing that still grows in the surrounding blighted lands. You had scoured the few clusters of cacti earlier in the day and had come up empty. Perhaps this man had gotten there first. Your stomach grumbles. 1 copper, you ask, offering the shiny coin you had just polished, holding it the edges so it will catch the sun. You have less than a dozen of the bullion rounds in a tube in your pocket. This fellow doesn't need to know that. The rest of your potential barter items you keep in a hidden spot close to your campsite outside the small village. The man wipes sweat from his eyes as he takes the copper from your fingers, produces a small nail, and scratches it on a smooth portion of the coin. It's the same color underneath as the polished surface. Real and pure, the man says, as he nods and smiles a toothless grin at you. Don't see much that still shines like this these days. Use these in water to kill the nasties and keep my plants fresh too. He motions for you to take the fruit, which you greedily snatch up. As it did for thousands of years in ancient civilizations, all the way up to roughly 100 years ago, will copper, or for that matter silver or even gold, see revival as currencies of trade in a world where fiat paper and digital currencies become inaccessible, along with the electrical grids and cell towers, rendered useless? Or will simple barter of goods rule the day? Well, the scenario I just shared is of course fictional. I like to consider what single copper round might buy and even a not-so-completely apocalyptic future where Venmo and the Cash App are distant, forgotten memories, vestiges of a past that quickly became useless once the grid went down and cell towers went offline. I'm sure someone in the comments will remind us that you'd be best off with beans, freedom seeds, and bandages. True enough, but not all of these things are as portable as coins. And most I'd rather hold on to as long as possible. It's the extras you could barter for. A can of roast beef hash is a great thing to have in a pinch. I don't know that I'd want a backpack filled with those cans. You could load up on bandages for barter. But what if the apocalypse we face is more along the lines of a civilization trying to restart itself in small pockets like the TV series Jericho? Unless you are the town medic, you might need a wider variety of things to trade. That's where I think a system of valuation on bullion, copper, silver, and gold in that order, might be useful as a portable way to exchange things of value. There are alternatives to copper rounds, like small denominations of junk silver coins that might be appealing to those people who appreciate the value of the metal in certain specific date ranges. But to the ignorant or those too young to know otherwise, they'll always be worth a dime or a quarter, or tied back to a failed fiat currency of paper, cupronickel, and zinc, and you won't necessarily have the time to educate your buyers otherwise during a trade. So what could a shiny, pure copper round be worth in a post-apocalyptic world of barter? I'll present 4 options for you to choose from, though I'm happy to hear others as well. Number 1. It depends. We can't know. Who can tell? Whatever the market will bear. Depends on who you are offering it to and when. It can't hurt to have a little on hand. Spoiler alert, I tend to think this is the correct answer as much as I'd like for number 4 on my list to be the actual answer if and when the time comes. Number 2. Nothing. Beans, bandages, and freedom seeds are all anyone will ever need. And access to water, of course. No one will want pure copper after the apocalypse. They'll be too busy saving their own miserable hides while I sit pretty in my well-stocked bunker, watching the rest of the world through a periscope. While I joke around a bit with it, this is a perfectly valid answer, and I won't begrudge you for it or some variant in the comments. Number 3. More than it's worth today. Especially out somewhere remote. I certainly think copper can hold its value, and maybe gain over time, but as I mentioned in a video, our copper rounds worth stacking some months back, I don't recommend the 1-ounce rounds or bars as a financial investment to turn a profit. The increase in value I propose here relates more to their portability and potential utility in crafting or as a form of primitive and historically proven currency after SHTF for small purchases. Even silver bugs who tout silver as the form of currency of the future after a societal collapse would likely not want to part with a silver bullion round for a couple of bottles of water. They might do so willingly for a copper round. Number 4. About $2 per 1-ounce coin by 2023 US dollar standards. I've collected some examples of what you might hope to trade a couple of shiny coppers for. I've considered making a sort of fantasy barter list like this for copper bullion to help define what is a small purchase versus an ounce of silver, which would be bigger. In particular, I can see a list like this being more useful in a less apocalyptic future where there's a disaster or collapse of a sort, but communities still have access to the basics for survival. Here are some examples of things you could get for roughly $2 to $4 today. A can of Beanie Weenies. A pack of adhesive bandages. Uncooked beans. A pound of brown rice. Some 22 LR blazers to keep up with the B letter theme, though I prefer to pay a bit more for copper HPs, of course. A tube of Bactracin zinc. It's not well appreciated how a small cut can turn into a life-threatening infection without small precaution of applying antibiotic ointment to a wound. So add that to the list of 3 Bs you need after SHTF. And maybe the other one, B, for copper bullion. And last up, bottled water. And clearly some of these items would see their value skyrocket in certain apocalyptic scenarios, such as the one in my story. Bottled water would be high on the list if you lived out in the Chihuahuan desert, and likely very hard to find not long after societal collapse. Not so much if you were near a pristine stream in snow-packed Alaska. Some of you might live in a city with copper pipes and wire running through all the buildings around you, making copper more of a commodity than it would be in a small cabin up in the mountains where you don't want to tear apart your own home's copper pipes, your only source of running water pulled from a solar well. The question, of course, I still have open myself is, would pure copper correspondingly increase in value with the list of items I just mentioned in the place or scenario I might find myself in? Or would just having a handful or tube of 20 portable 1-ounce bullion rounds on hand just be valuable to me for knowing all the things I mentioned in my last video I might use them for in a survival situation? Perhaps the best true measure of trade for pure copper in my story would have been the junk out in the tables and not the prickly pear fruits. Pure copper would seem a fair trade for a handful of oddly sized steel bolts needed to repair a device required to get my own slice of civilization back. A cast iron handle and a box of scavenged parts could be traded for copper, and perfect for a hand-pumped well in a secret out-of-the-way place I discovered. Perhaps it could be traded for a couple of still sealed but iffy rechargeable AA batteries that you hope to charge with a rare AA solar charger you found. I'll leave the value up to you in the comments, even if you only like copper as something pretty to look at since it's inexpensive. I'd like to hear your opinion too. Or if aluminum is your thing. Same. In my home, when my sons perform some chore, I'll give them a copper round or two, which they can later redeem for $2 each if they want something ordered online or in a store. So the $2 system is in place, at least in my tiny corner of the world. So as I wrap up this video, given the several uses I've mentioned previously here on my channel, what would you say is the value of a single copper bullion round? Which choice